we're just, we have our anniversary day. And in the past, I have done like special anniversary messages. I'm not doing that today. I remember my father, some of you know, is a preacher. I remember one Mother's Day, he stood up in the pulpit and he opened his sermon by saying, "Today, as you all know, is Mother's Day in America, but we're not here to honor mothers, we're here to honor God. Let us begin." That did not go over well with anybody, including his wife, but to his credit, he opened Father's Day the very same way. But sometimes you just stick with the story. So we're just going to keep going here. So we're going to pick up where we left off, and we're going to get to the crossing the Jordan today. And this is kind of an interesting thing because it is a metaphor for us. We use crossing the Jordan as a way to express, passing off this earth into the next earth. You'll sometimes hear people that cross to the other side. Maybe not as much now, but it used to be very common expression we would use. The Jordan River shows up again and again and again throughout Scripture, and it's always kind of significant when it does. We see it being used. Of course, Jesus goes to the Jordan River. We see that Elisha and Elijah go across the Jordan River, and there's a lot there. But this is kind of like the first time we see the Jordan River really become part of the biblical story. So I'm going to read through the account and kibitz a little bit here and there, but I really have a message that God led on my heart that I want to give to you today, something that I saw that I thought was interesting. Anyway, we'll start out. Joshua rose early in the morning. I guess that's what you do when you're a leader. I don't. I'm the last person out of bed in my house. Anyway, but they set out from the acacia grove and came to the Jordan. And he and all the children of Israel lodged there before they crossed over. So they got to the Jordan River, and they set up their tents, and for the night they camped out to relax, because tomorrow they're crossing the Jordan. And on the other side of the Jordan, of course, is Jericho, the very first battle they're going to have to fight to take over the Promised Land. So, they need a little rest before that. So it was after 3 days that the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, "When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall set off from your place and go after it." So this is going to happen now. This is real. It's about to get very real. And so it's going to happen. And when you see it, you just pick up and you follow it, right? And so that's it. And here we go. And the thing that's interesting is that the first thing God does is he sends the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Ark of the Covenant symbolizes the presence of the Lord. Now, they took the tabernacle, the tablets that Moses had, that he had the law on, that he had to make after he broke God's tablets, and they put them into the Ark of the Covenant. So that's the presence of the Lord. When they would camp, they would take the Ark of the Covenant into the temple and put it back into the holy place, and that's how they would set up. So that was God's presence. That was symbolic of God's presence. And of course, you all saw Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, so you know what that leads to eventually, which I'm sure happened. But the point is that this is the presence of the Lord, and I just want to show you the symbolism here, because what he's saying is everybody's relaxed. We know there's a battle coming, but everybody's relaxed, but you're going to move when you see the presence of the Lord move. Right? When the ark moves through the camp and the presence of the Lord is moving, you're going to get up and you're going to follow him. And he actually tells them that you're going to follow from a slight distance. He says, there shall be a space between you and it. Don't crowd the Ark of the Covenant. Don't try to hurry past the presence of the Lord. That's sometimes something that some of us need to hear, I think. When we were maybe about halfway through this journey that we've been on so far, I had someone come to the church one Saturday night, and it was interesting because I knew her. She'd been here before. She wasn't a regular attendee, but she came occasionally. And we had started the service, and she came in late. Now, some of you do come in late from various reasons, but she had never come in late before. And it turns out that the reason she came in late was she was sitting in her car. And when she's sitting in her car, she was praying, because God had told her to give me a message, and she didn't want to. And it wasn't that she was afraid of the message exactly. She didn't even understand it. But she'd never done that before. And she was nervous about it. And she didn't want to have to do it. And she would say, God, are you sure this is you? And like her heart was just pounding in her chest. And she knew God was saying, I want you to give him this message. And she said, I don't know. That sounds prideful to me. She was just like really having a hard time with it. And so she kind of slinks in the back after the service starts and kind of sits down there. And I don't know anything about what happened in the parking lot. I just go about my normal business. And when the sermon was over, she comes up to me. And again, I've spoken to her many times, but she was really nervous. I could tell she was super nervous. It didn't make any sense to me. I'm not a scary person. And she comes walking up and she says, I have to tell you something. I think I have a word from the Lord for you. I said, okay, let's hear it. She says, really? I said, yeah, if you have a word from the Lord, I want to hear it. Let me hear it. She says, well, I got to tell you right now, I don't know what it means. Don't ask me what it means. I said, it's okay. So the interpretation wasn't given to you. That's all right. Go ahead tell me. And she said this, the speed of the flock is determined by the shepherd. And it hit me like a bolt of lightning because I've been praying to God if we're moving too slowly here. And I was trying to make things happen. I was trying to think, do I need to work harder because we're not moving like I think we need to move here? And I was kind of frustrated by the lack of progress I felt with Spirit Chapel. And God was just basically saying, no, the speed of the flock is determined by the shepherd. And see, I knew he didn't mean me. Sometimes we talk about pastoring a flock. I knew who the shepherd was. It wasn't me. He's basically saying, you guys will go as fast as I take you. You follow with me, right? The Ark of the Covenant goes through the people, and you stand back and let it go because the people will move as fast as the Ark of the Covenant goes. And you don't really want to get ahead of God, just so you know. You don't really want it, but sometimes we do. We just kind of get anxious, and I think we need to go. And a lot of times, he tells us to do something to tell us what we're going to do, but we don't do it now. And there's this waiting period where he's doing things. And it's hard. It's hard to sit there and wait, but sometimes we have to remember that this is how it works. When you're being led by a shepherd, the shepherd sets the speed, not us. Okay, so going back again to this. So he says, here's what I need you to do. Stay back, see where it goes, because you don't know where you're going. It's what he says. He says, you've never passed this way before. Don't crowd. If you crowd in, you won't be able to see where you're going. I want you to stay back far enough so when the ark moves ahead of you, you can actually see where it's going. So you'll know where you're going. You've never been here before. Relax. Don't push it. And Joshua said to the people, now this was before that was the officers went through. Now Joshua walks through. Now watch what he says. He says, sanctify yourselves. Sanctify yourselves. And then he says this, for tomorrow the Lord is going to do wonders in your midst. Signs and wonders, that's our words for miracles. Tomorrow, God's going to do not a miracle, but miracles, plural, in your midst. So you need to prepare for that. You need to sanctify yourself, because if God's going to come in your midst and do miracles, you need to be ready. You don't want to be watching these miracles as a sinful person. You need to sanctify yourself. Now, sanctify means to be set apart. That's what sanctification means. It means you're set apart. You're set apart for God's purposes. That's what it means. And so he says, you need to take the time necessary to get yourself right and set yourself apart for God's purposes, because he's going to be doing miracles and you're going to participate. You're going to get to join in at some point, and that's going to be great, but you can only join in if you're set aside for him. So he's telling us ahead of time, because you cannot receive the full promise of God until you're set apart for his purposes. And that's sometimes something we forget. We want all that happening in our lives, but we don't want to change. It's like, you do all that stuff, God, I change, I promise you I will. He says, you understand, I don't just want to show you. He's not a showman. God's not a magician. He's not a performer. The purpose of his miracles is to bring us in. He co-opts us into his miracles. And in order for you to participate in this, you have to be ready. It's like, if you're going to be doing operation, you better clean up first. You don't want to bring in that kind of germs to the operating room. You don't want to bring a bunch of sinful stuff into the miracle God's getting ready to perform. So you need to sanctify yourself ahead of the miracle. And a lot of times we just do one, do it the other way. God says, no, first of all, you sanctify yourself. And then they take up the covenant, the Ark of the Covenant, and they went before them. And then God tells Joshua, this day, this day I will exalt you in the sight of all of Israel. I'm going to exalt you. You know why? Because up until now, he's always been Moses' assistant. And now he's going to be in charge. And God's saying, I'm going to make it so they know that you have the same God helping you that Moses had helping him. That's what he's saying. He says, they may know that as I was with Moses, I will be with you. And you shall command the priests who bear the ark, saying, when you have come to the edge of the water, the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. So this is a couple of things that are kind of interesting, because he's saying the Israelites need to learn something. They've been following Moses, and Moses has been a great leader, the greatest civil leader probably who ever lived. But they eventually need to learn that they were never following Moses to begin with. They were following the Lord. And what this whole thing's going to do now is I'm going to show them that they've been following me. Moses has just been a spokesperson the way you're the spokesperson, but they're really following me. And what you need to do is you need to command the priests, because I'm telling you to. The priests actually answer to God, but God now puts them to listen to Joshua and says, you tell them this. When they come to the Jordan River, I want them to put their feet in the Jordan River. And so Joshua says to the children of Israel, come here and hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, by this you will know that the living God is among you. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. The Jordan River is the only thing that's separating them from the promised land right now. That's it. And he says the ark of the covenant is going to go in there. And you're going to follow it. Because God does not send us into battle, he leads us into battle, and that's a big difference. The Ark of the Covenant is going first. It's going first in the Jordan. It's going first across the Jordan. It's going first into Jericho. The presence of the Lord is going first, and you're following. I'm not sending you into battle. I'm leading you into battle. I'm in the front, and I'm going to do miracles. Don't worry. And the priest will carry the ark of the Lord of all the earth, to the water's edge, right at the edge of that river. And watch this. As soon as the soles of the priest's feet come to rest in the waters, it will stop flowing. The water that's coming down the river will pile up in one place. This is interesting, by the way, because if you go back into Exodus and you read what he says about the Red Sea, he uses exactly the same words. God loves making water sculptures. I'm going to pile them up. Right? It's going to stop. And that's how you will know that the living God is among you. You will know because you're going to watch something happen that cannot happen by natural means. It's a miracle that's going to happen before your life, before your eyes. But I want you to see that it happens when the priest's feet shall come to rest in the waters. In other words, you're not going to dip your toe into the promise. The promise is not fulfilled until the soles of the feet come to rest in the promise. See, a lot of times we kind of like to dip our toe in what God's telling us to do. A little tiny bit. He said, no, I want that whole soul resting, flat-footed in the water. When you do that, then you will see the Jordan River stack up on itself. Then you will see the place that you're going to go across. That's how it's going to work. But we can't miss this progression. Now, that's the story for the day. But while I was reading this, something occurred to me. This is the same God, but he's not leading the same people. The only people who are alive right now that came out of Egypt are Joshua, Caleb, and their families. That's it. Even Moses is gone now. The entire generation of people, 40 years, there's an entire generation which has been raised up. And they're not like the first generation. They've had a different life than the first generation had. The first generation started as slaves. That's how the story starts. We do the Passover every year, and they start as slaves. They're slaves. They can't do anything but what Pharaoh tells them to do. And they have taken on Egyptian ways. They were serving Egyptian gods. They were corrupt that way. But they died off because of their lack of faith. And a new generation has been brought up. And I want to show you that God's treating the new generation differently than he treated the old generation. And this is consistent. This is consistent. And Paul talks about this in the New Testament. Paul says this. He says, I don't want you ignorant of the fact, brothers and sisters, that our ancestors were all under the cloud and they all passed through the sea. They were all protected by the tower, the cloud of tower and the column of fire. They were protected by those. They passed through the same Red Sea. They were all baptized by Moses in the cloud and the sea. They ate the same manna. They drank water from rocks. They all did it. They all saw it, right? They drank from that spiritual rock that accompanied them, and that rock we know is Christ. That's the symbolism, he says. But God was not pleased with them, and their bodies never made it out of the wilderness. Everybody had the same opportunity to see what God was doing as Moses, Joshua, and Caleb, but only Joshua and Caleb would live to see the promised land. They never made it there, he said. So he goes on, he says, we need to learn from them. He said, they're given to us as examples. Remember, I always tell you, the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. Right? This is it. These lives really happened. These people really did this, but God is using that to teach us about our spiritual journey with him. That's what Paul's saying here. These things occurred as examples to keep us from setting our hearts on evil things. There's a reason they didn't make it into the promised land. He's going to list them right now. He says, we're not supposed to become idolaters as they were. They all worshipped other gods. They worshipped Baal in Egypt, and they worshipped Baal when they got to Mount Sinai. They're idolaters. Don't do that, he says. He also says that we should not be sexually immoral like they were. They were horrible. They were committing sin right there in the wilderness, in the shelter of the column of fire. And we should not test God, or he's saying Christ, but they tested him. God, if you really loved us, you give us water now. God, if you really loved us, like he's some kind of a poodle in the circus. Here, you don't jump through that hoop. That was pretty good. God, can you jump through this hoop now? I'm still not sure you love me, God. How about this hoop? He says, don't test the Lord your God. That's how you get left in the wilderness. And he says, and you shouldn't be grumbling as they did. They complained about everything. Here they were eating food from heaven, drinking water from rocks, and their sandals never wore out the entire time they were there. And all they could find to do is complain. He said, we shouldn't be like that. They're examples of what we should not be. They're warnings that have been written down for us. So he's telling us we can look at the Old Testament, we can learn from it. And we should look at the Old Testament and learn from it, which is why we're preaching from Joshua. Because the Old Testament's things to teach us. And so it's important for us to take a look at everything that's being taught here. Because there's something very important, I think, that's being taught that sometimes we forget. Here's what God says about the people who don't make it to the promised land. He says this to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs I have performed among them? What does it take? What does it take? We started this whole journey out by me destroying the Egyptian army before their very eyes. You'd think that'd buy me some grace. They were complaining within 24 hours of that they didn't have any water. Like, I am a God powerful enough to destroy the Egyptian army, but I forgot they needed water. He said, what does it take with these people? How much do I have to do before they start listening to me? Just listen to me. Why do I have to prove everything to them? It gets worn out. It's tiring. I don't know. How long does God have to do stuff for us before we just start listening, right? When is everything God has already done enough? When do we stop asking God, what have you done for me lately? When's it just enough? In spite of what he's done. The Lord said to Moses, how long will they do this in spite of what I've done? How long will they treat me with contempt? In spite of everything I have done. Now, the people who grow up after them, the second generation, they don't start their life as slaves. They start their lives in the wilderness, but they're the children of the living God. They're the chosen tribe of a God who has plans for them to take them to a promised land. In the same way God has plans for you to take you to a promised land. But because they didn't grow up in Egypt, God expects more out of them. You need to know this. Jesus is no communist. Jesus says this in Luke, for everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask more. This is how it works in the kingdom of heaven. God gives you something, and you do it. Now he's going to give you more, and he's going to require more. That's how it works. And as long as you keep giving more, he keeps giving you more. This is called growth. And that's what God wants to do with us. That's what Jesus says he wants to do with us. In fact, we are told to grow in grace and in knowledge. Both. We want to grow in grace. We want to be forgiven. That's great. But he says you should also be growing in knowledge. You should be growing. You should be learning. And we should be moving from this belief that's kind of shaky to belief that's strong, this faith that's strong, to trust, and all the way to knowledge. We should be moving in our lives. We shouldn't be staying stagnant at all. Let me show you something. This shows up in the New Testament. I'm going to drop it back to what's going on in Joshua, but I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but in Matthew 8, there's a famous story where Peter walks in the water, right? But before he walks in the water, this happens. He gets in a boat, and his disciples follow him, and a violent storm comes up on the scene. Oh, actually, this is a different one. That's a different story. But this is still there. A violent storm comes up, and Jesus was sleeping. Jesus was napping in front of the boat. I love that. This violent storm comes up, and Jesus is just sleeping, right? And they're scared to death. And they say, Lord, save us. We are perishing. Do you not care? We're all dying here. Wake up the Lord. He doesn't realize we're all going to die. Okay? The fact that Jesus was sleeping should have given them comfort that they weren't going to die. If he's sleeping, everything's fine. Yeah, I used to have a 150-pound German Shepherd that snored when he slept. And there were some times in the middle of the night, I'd wake up and I thought I heard a sound or something. You ever had that happen? And I'd listen for the sound, and I couldn't hear it. But you know what I heard? I heard my 150-pound German Shepherd snoring. And I went right back to sleep because I knew there was no sound in the house. It must have been a dream. I knew that was okay. Jesus is bigger than a 150-pound German Shepherd. Right? He's the God of God's King of Kings. And if he's sleeping in the boat, everything's fine. But instead of that, they say, wake up, Jesus, we're all going to die. So the presence of Jesus was not enough to keep the fear away. Do you see that? The presence of Jesus was not enough. Which is why when he wakes up, he kind of snarls at him. And I know this. If you wake me up from a nap, I'm not in the best mood either. He says, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Well, how do we know they have little faith? Because Jesus' presence was not enough to keep them from being afraid. The Bible tells us perfect love casts out fear. There shouldn't have been any fear in that boat. Jesus was there. Now, compare that to this story, another very famous, well-known story in the Bible. Centurion comes to Jesus, says, I have a Jewish servant who's sick, and he's going to die. And Jesus says, okay, I'll go and heal him. Because everybody told him, this is a good man. He takes care of the Jews, and he loves the Lord, even though he's a Gentile. And Jesus says, okay, I'll go heal him. And the centurion says, whoa, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. I don't need you to. Just say the word, and my servant will be healed. I'm a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell one to go, and he goes. I tell another to come, and he comes. I tell my servant to do something, and he does it. I know who you are, and I know you don't have to show up in my house to heal the servant. I don't need your presence to know your power. Which is why Jesus says, I haven't heard of faith like this in all of Jerusalem, including his 12 disciples. Because his disciples, with his presence there, were afraid. This guy says, I don't even need your presence. Your word will be enough. Do you see where Jesus wants us? Do you see why he was upset with his disciples? Not that they woke him up, although that probably bothered them a little bit, I think. But not that they woke him up, but because they shouldn't have had to wake him up. He's there. Have you not realized who I am yet? Nothing's going to happen if I'm on the boat with you. That can't happen. I want you, he's telling them, to be like the centurion, where even when my presence isn't there, you believe me. That's harder, isn't it? It's harder to be that person. But that's the person he wants to be, because our faith is designed to grow. Faith is designed to grow. If you have the same faith today that you had when you first started walking with the Lord, something's wrong. Your faith is supposed to grow. You're supposed to grow in knowledge and in grace. You're supposed to grow in the Lord. Getting back to the Israelites here. The Israelites coming out of Egypt were slaves. God didn't expect too much from them. He did not expect too much. And we see this before he parts the Red Sea. Moses says to the people, don't be afraid. Army's crashing down on them. They're going to kill them. Moses says, don't be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance of the Lord. The Lord will bring it to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you'll never see again. I like the other translation says, you'll see them again, never forever. I love that. But the Lord will fight for you. You only need to stand still. Don't run. The Lord won't fight for you if you run. But if you can just stand still, that will be enough. And in fact, he's going to take care of you by that river, the Red Sea in front of you, as the children of Israel walked on dry land in the midst of the sea. He told them, he said, you stand still and watch. I'm going to separate the sea. I'm going to blow a breeze there to dry the land for you. So you're going to walk across on dry land. You're not going to get muddy. You're not going to get wet. All you need to do is stand there while I do the work. And then when you cross on the other side, I'm going to wipe out the entire Egyptian army. And all you need to do is stand there and watch me do it. Why? Because they were slaves. They hadn't walked with the Lord very long at all by this time. They hadn't seen his great miracles. They saw some plagues and things, but he said, I understand who you are. I'm going to build your faith, though. Watch this. This will build your faith. It sure should have. But 40 years later, that was different. 40 years later, the Israelites coming to the Promised Land had been raised in the presence of God. Every day of their life, they saw that column of fire, and every night, the column of smoke. No, it was the other way around. Column of smoke in the day, column of fire at night. Every day, every night. They had seen him destroy armies. They had seen him save them from the serpents. They had seen all these things. They'd grown up with it. They had never been slaves. They had always been free. Don't you know God has a higher requirement from them? Because they've seen much. They know much. And because that God expects much. The priest will carry the ark, and as soon as the souls of the priests are in the water, I'll part it. Not until. You don't walk across on dry land this time. In fact, the water doesn't part until you put your foot in the water. Because I expect more from you. You're not slaves. You understand? This is how it works, right? We're talking about the second generation believers, but this should be us. We should be growing. We should be growing in the Lord. And he should be expecting us, right? Sanctify yourselves. It's active preparation. God's going to do a miracle, but you need to sanctify yourself. They weren't called to sanctify themselves before the Red Sea. Now they are. Get yourselves right. I'm going to do a miracle. You're going to participate. Get ready. Make yourselves ready. You know how to do this. You know how to set yourselves apart. You know this. And the miracle happens when the feet get wet. But you must act in faith before you see. We're going to grow up here, Israelites. We're going to cross over on wet ground this time. But it's okay, because I'm growing you. Mature faith trusts God's character, not his signs. Jesus gets frustrated in the New Testament when they come and keep asking for signs. He goes, you know what? This generation, that's all you want is signs. I'm tired of it. I'm showing you the signs so you know who I am. It's my character you need to know. It's the character of God we trust, not in the signs. We trust in the character. Our continuing growth is a partnership with God. This should excite you because he doesn't want us to do it all. A lot of times I hear people saying, well, I'm just waiting for the Spirit. You know, he's going to work me out and make me in the image of Christ. And he's working a little slowly, but, I'll be patient. Well, what are you doing? Because it's supposed to be a partnership. You're supposed to be working with God in this. It's not supposed to be all that. Here's how faith grows. James says this. Someone might say, well, you have faith and I have deeds. Well, show me your faith without deeds, and I'll show you my faith by what I do. And he goes on and says, faith without works is dead. Here's the great thing about that, by the way. The inverse of it is also true. If faith without works is dead, what could we say about faith with works? It's alive. And living things grow. You want to grow your faith? Be obedient to what God has told you to do. That's the story. That's the story all throughout the Bible. And that's the story of the Israelites standing in front of the Jordan River. It's time to grow. It's time to step forward. You're going to get wet this time. You're still going to win the battle, but you're going to fight the battle. We're going to do this together. This time you fight. You didn't fight the Egyptians. You watched them go glub, glub, glub. But this time you're going to have to. But as co-workers with Christ, we get to carry his presence into impossible situations. Because that's what the Israelites are doing. Jericho has never been conquered before, ever. It's about to be by a bunch of Israelites following the Ark of the Covenant into the land. That's the difference. God has never been there before. He's about to conquer Jericho. And they're co-workers with him because they're carrying the ark. And they're marching behind it. And they're doing what God told them to do. It's still a small thing, but it's still part of it. He gets to do that. The Egyptian generation needed to see before they could believe. The wilderness generation was called to obey before they would see. The question is, which generation are you? How long have you walked with God? How much have you seen him do? This church has been here for 12 years now. I feel like we should be better than we are. I should be better than I am. How long? How long do we have to let God do everything when we'll just watch and applaud? That'd be great. Maybe it's God telling us it's time for us to get our feet wet.